Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Who's speaking?
Jared.
All right, Jared, what did you think the plot of that story was?
Um, I think it had to do with a lot of sort of the working out of resentment towards his absent father and sort of like this dichotomy between having a filial type of love that you can't control, but also that resentment at the same time working against you. Um,
Yes,
and sort of getting to a place where you're okay with that.
that's good. Okay, so I like the way that you were able to take the plot from the external to the internal. That's very good, actually, because it is the internal plot. And how would you say, what's the resolution to that plot then? Let's go with that as the plot. What would be the resolution?
I think a lot of the resolution has to do with the friend that he ended up taking with him.
Yes,
Like,
Thomas.
yeah, he is this sort of storyteller and is sort of like, even though he seems strange, has this grounded wisdom about him, the way that he's able to like describe scenarios and stories that keeps them rooted in their culture in a more contemporary sense. Like he sort of takes on, he is sort of the personification of a role of, that of the aged storyteller, but in the contemporary age. That there's sort of
Yes.
he creates that connection to that, and which is about death and rebirth and continuation.
Yes, and you could argue in some ways that that's what storytelling does. It carries the story. Very good. Does anybody else have a plot, an idea for a plot?
This is Sophia, by the way.
Hi, Sophia.
Hi. I kind of thought that a lot of the plot had to deal with like the friend as well, where it was kind of like the social norms on how you should behave in the social setting. And so it seems like it was kind of like how he figures out how to push away the social norms and actually be friends with someone who goes against that throughout the story. And then it was kind of interesting at the end to me how his like closure of that was like kind of saying that it's like hard to go against what most people think, and so it's like normal to like fear that. And so that's why he kind of was like, well, I will go listen to one of your stories, but I don't know if I'll ever really go be friends with him after this trip.
Yeah, yeah. Very good, very good. Y'all are catching on to this very quickly. You're seeing that the plot doesn't have to do with the external events. Very good. And I think that these type of stories are much harder to write, where all this is going on internally rather than, having car crashes and I don't know, mass murders and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, leading from plot to character, what would you say that I could almost argue that the father's the character of the story, even though he's dead.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to dispute that or go with that or?
Um, yeah, I could talk to you for this one. Yeah, I feel like the father is definitely part of the story, especially when Thomas brings him into the story with the like his memory of the father at like the lake or where he went, and then where he met the father and kind of how he just like took him home. I feel like that kind of brought him into the story and like brought more of a connection to the character of the father.
Definitely. So even though he's off stage and it's backstory, which incidentally, when you're reading these stories and you're reading from a writer's point of view, one of the advice that we almost always give beginning writers is no backstory, no backstory, no backstory. But this author does it very well. But it's obviously the backstory because the father's dead. But I felt like it needed to be in there. It would have been a different story if we hadn't have known the father.
Mm-hmm.
Some
And
of the minor, oh, go ahead, Jared. Go ahead, Jared.
Sorry, I was
That's
going
okay.
to expound on that point. You know, the father exists in all this sort of ephemera of either stories or the perceptions of how he dealt with his mom, or when they meet the woman that was taking care of the ashes, that give insight in and develop the character of the father for the reader as you go along with it. That sort of ultimately just leads to the actual physical father, which are his ashes.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yes, yes. What about some of the minor characters in the story? For example, I think her name was Norma, who had broken up the fight between the two boys, and then the gymnast that they meet on the plane, Kathy.
I think the gymnast in the first one that they first meet, it's sort of like their first introduction to society outside of the reservation as well. And I think that there was always, like in a lot of Sherman Alexi's writing, there's always sort of like this collision of worlds between, you know, reservation life and then the modern world
Yes, yes.
that he explores, and other ways that they sort of cling to their reservation heritage by the way that they wear their hair, or how they interact, or how they ham it up. You
Yeah,
know, they know that they're expected to, that they're perceived a certain way and play to that, even though it may not necessarily be their true character.
yeah. Very good, very good. Yes. And so the fact that she was representing the U.S. Olympics is sort of, I don't know how to explain this, but it's like sort of on the opposite spectrum of being in this sort of isolated reservation in terms of space, you know, all the bells and whistles of the gymnast and the Olympics and all of that. What about setting? The story never does tell us exactly what town the story takes place in, but we know that it's close to Spokane, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. Um, and we know that they had to drive on the other side of Nevada to get to Phoenix. But Phoenix is also the setting of the story. Is there any point to the setting?
This is Bobby speaking.
Okay.
I guess you could argue to a certain extent that, like basically travel vessels is a major setting point, whether it's the car or the airplane. It exists as like an intimate space for setting, and almost makes it so that Spokane and all of these different places seem foreign to the intimacy of them sitting in the sitting in the cab of an airplane or in the cab of a car or something like that.
That's actually brilliant. And you know what you could do? You could even argue that the space of being in that box of cremated ashes, you could add that to it.
Totally.
You know how they say they divide him up and then they say put him in the back seat here, remember? So you could even argue that that's sort of this, they've gone from this sort of where are you contained as far as a container, whether it be a car or an airplane in life, versus this box that you're put in space and death, and then knowing that at the end they're both going to release him out of that space together to where that the two halves will again become one.
Right.
And you could also sort of insert the reservation as a contained space.
Yes.
Narrative. And it's all in like this grand contrast, because when you're imagining these areas, that these desolate areas that you're driving through in types of places, and the environment that you could imagine would be Arizona, it's deserty, it's vast and sort of flat and really wide and huge skies. You know, it provides like a sort of endless contrast to any sort of confinement.
That's a very good point. Yes, and they really drive that home when they talk about how dead everything looks when they only had that one live animal the whole time.
Yeah, and the father's dead. Everything else,
Yes.
the environment is dead. So, I mean,
And then the space that the father lived in, when you talk about, they talked about how bad it smelled too. You could do a whole paper on the spaces in this short story. Great conversation. I never even thought about that, you guys. Very good. Very good. Point of view. Well, it's obviously third person, right?
right.
Now, if it were limited, we would only get one person's perspective. That means we only see events through their eyes. But if it's omniscient, that means we get it through both of their point of views. And you may not have noticed it, but this does slip into both of their point of views at times. In fact, on page 202, I don't know if y'all have the book in front of you, but on 202, it says, Victor stopped the pickup in front of Thomas Fields the Fire's HUD house. They both yawned, stretched a little, shook dust from their bodies. I'm tired, Victor said. Of everything, Thomas added. They both searched for words to end the journey. Victor needed to thank Thomas for help, for the money, and make the promise to pay it all back. I think it's primarily Victor's point of view, but it does slip into Thomas's occasionally. And in the hands of a beginning writer, that can be a nightmare. If you're a beginning writer, you want to try to stay in one point of view. Trust me on that. Otherwise, you're going to be head hopping. In fact, I don't know if I need to announce it to y'all, that I've started this writing tips page, and one of them on there was point of view. And it talks about head hopping and how you don't want to be head hopping, jumping in and out of everybody's head. In fact, it's something that you want to go through your final draft of your story and read it just for that. Only look for point of view shifts in your story, and you'll see some. Are y'all clear on what I'm talking about? Kind of raise your hand or give me a nod. I can't hear y'all.
Yeah, I'm going back to work now.
Okay. Thank you, Jared.
No problem. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so y'all see kind of what I'm talking about, where it's only things that they could see from their point of view. If I'm telling a story from my point of view and I say her husband really was hoping that she would bring him some ice cream, that's a mistake. That's a mistake because I'm telling the story from my point of view. Now, what I could do is say, Laurie knew her husband so well, she knew that he was hoping she would bring him some ice cream. See the difference there? Rather than saying he was hoping Laurie would bring him some ice cream. Y'all see that? Can somebody else give me an example of that so I can kind of make sure y'all got it? It can be a little bit tricky. She thought reading was boring. If the story's from Mary's point of view, Mary thought reading was boring. She never really liked it very much. She hated to read, in fact. Bill was thinking about telling her he hated to read too. That's a mistake because you're in Mary's point of view. Now, what you could do is say, Mary also knew that her husband Bill hated to read. See, because then you're telling it from her point of view. Okay? Most of that will come naturally because it's natural to tell a story from one point of view, but it's also very easy, even for experienced writers, to accidentally hop on over into somebody else's head. And it's something you want to be careful of. Remember, you can break any rule you want. Any rule in the world you can break. Just be aware that you're breaking it and know why you're breaking it. Otherwise, it's going to come across as the mistake that it is. Okay? What about the theme? Anybody have an idea of the theme? This is a hard story. It's a hard story.
I feel like there are multiple thematic elements. but one that seemed to, sorry, there's like a plane flying overhead if it's loud. But anyway, one that I saw was kind of like this acceptance of how his relationship with Thomas used to be, when he tells him how, sorry, now there's a car
That's
alarm
okay,
too.
don't worry about it. That happens to me, don't worry.
But yeah, it's when he is kind of giving that, not quite an internal dialogue, but when he's talking about how he knows that their relationship, like, they're not going to become friends again, and there's just this acceptance of, this is a moment in time where we're expressing an intimacy for each other and having a shared experience, but this stands alone and it's not going to change. So the thematic element of sometimes people get caught up in the moment and believe that everything is going to change and, oh, we're going to be best friends again, but deep down they know that that's not the reality. But that also, he keeps talking about the tribe and how it used to be different, and he wishes that they could go back. And when they're on the plane, he talks about, like, man, we're stuck in this setting together where we have to be friendly. Why can't it be like that all the time? So it's like this, the struggle of people wanting intimacy but never doing the heavy lifting to actually make it happen.
You know, that's a very good theme. And so it would sort of be that, and I think that what happens is that Victor, I would argue that this is definitely Victor's story, definitely. And that's another thing you can ask yourself when you're reading literature. Whose story is this? You know, whose story is this? Who changes? Who wants what and why can't they have it? I think definitely it's Victor, because Victor is the one who comes to this realization. And what that would be called in literary terms is an epiphany. He's come to this awakening. And it's a little bit sad, you know, to the reader, I think, as well as to him, that it's not going to be, they're not going to be friends after this. It's not. And that neither one of them are even going to want to work towards that, you know, that they had this moment together, but then that's going to be the end of it. I think, though, that on a more cheerful note of that theme, you could add that there's a time and a space for these sort of magical moments to happen, but when they're gone, they're gone. And so that maybe the lesson or the theme would be, enjoy these moments while they last. You know, one of the things I've learned with my granddaughters, that I had my children way too young to learn, and I was way too busy to pay attention when my children were little, but it's a little bit different with my grandchildren. I've learned I'll never get this day back with them again. You know, yeah, I think I do have time to slow down and read them a story, or yeah, you know, enjoy, this is the moment right now. I don't get to pick the moment. This moment came to me, and so I need to seize this moment. And I kind of think that's part of kind of what this story is, that though, even though it was the father's death that brought them together, that it was at a moment in time that there was a sort of something magical happened to them together. But you're right, it won't last, and it'll never happen between them again. Very, very subtle. Good reading of that, Bobby. Very good reading. The voice, I thought, was kind of just friendly, plain. It wasn't hoity-toity, fancy, or esoteric. And the advice that I would give you is to write like you talk. I speak a very strong dialect. I don't write in dialect where you leave the little INGs off. Don't ever do that. That's way outdated. The way that you tell that a story's in dialect is by the way they use the language. Like they might say, I'm fixing to go to the store, or I done got rid of him. But you spell the words correctly. But somebody once told me that you can tell all my stories take place in a small Texas town just because of the things that happen in there. So you're going to have a natural voice, and I would encourage you to find that voice and to use that voice and to train that voice and to learn to love that voice, because voice is something, unfortunately, you just cannot teach. But it's a very important attribute. It's often what separates the really great writers from the mediocre writers. So I would encourage you to write from your natural voice, the way that your voice is wanting you to tell that story. If you're wanting to tell that story in the present tense and it keeps coming out in the present tense, and you keep going, yeah, but Dr. Champion said right in the past tense, write in the present tense then, because that's the way that story is wanting to be told. It's begging to be told. It won't feel right. It won't sound right. So I encourage you to grasp that voice and celebrate that voice. You have a voice in you. Every one of you has a voice. You just need to find that voice, celebrate that voice, and use that voice in your writing. Don't try to write like somebody you're not. I'm not trying to write like some educated New Yorker in my fiction. It wouldn't work, okay? Because you want your fiction to be genuine, okay? And I think that this story is told in a perfect voice. It's very believable. It sounds like Victor would talk. You can kind of hear it. It's very well done. Somebody who hasn't said something, I want you to say something about this story, and then we're going to move on to A and P. Landon? Landon? Well, Jacob? Can y'all hear me, Bobby?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I guess they're not here. Jacob, are you here? They may not hear me. Okay. Anthony, are you here? Anthony?
He actually just signed off.
Oh, he signed off. Okay. Well, A and P, this is one of my very favorite stories. I just love the opening line. It is just so classic. So classic. John Updike is one of our finest American short story writers, I should add, right now. In walks these three girls in nothing but bathing suits. I'm in the third checkout slot with my back to the door, so I don't see them until they're over by the bread. The one that caught my eye first was the one in the plaid green two-piece. Just the voice in this story. You can just hear it from the very beginning. I want y'all to do most of the talking on this one. Start out with what element you think was the strongest in this story. Or maybe answer the question, is this character-driven or plot-driven?
Seems like it's character driven because a lot of the actions happen between like the main worker and then the boss and the girls.
Yeah, so we don't have Oreo cookies falling off the shelves and people tripping over them and things like that. The characters are the one moving the plot forward rather than the plot moving the characters forward.
Mm-hmm.
Good, very good. Obviously, it's first person, so it's Sammy's point of view. So everything is from his point of view because it's in the first person. First person is very hard to write because your narrator is both a character and the narrator. So I strongly recommend that you write from the third person if you're a beginning writer. It's easier. What's the point of this story? Sophia, you want to take, or Bobby, go ahead.
By point, do you mean like the theme?
Anything, just what, yeah, theme. That's another way of saying theme.
It was kind of hard for me to fish it out because I feel like at the end, the whole kind of motif of like the small but the small kind of fallen hero, like he tries really hard to make and nothing works out for him, but he tries to do the right thing.
Yes.
But as you were saying before, I feel like the theme just wasn't well, you weren't saying this, but I feel like the theme wasn't the strongest element, but like you were saying, the voice just stands out to me. It sounds kind of like you're sitting around having a beer with the guy and he's just telling
Isn't
you like, oh my God, you got to hear what happened at work today. You know?
yeah. I mean, that voice, that's just raw talent right there. Raw talent,
Right.
isn't it? You can just hear it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great story to teach in terms of voice. Now, I do want to tell y'all that some of the decisions made, what stories get chosen for these kind of books, has to do with who owns the rights and the expense and all of that. So I can promise you that these probably weren't his first choices, but but this story's anthologized a lot. I thought that's interesting because I had written down for the thing that your heroes die hard, and he tried so hard to be a hero, but it just, I don't know. It's something about that he kind of figured out what he had done, or theme's hard on this one, but I don't know if you're supposed to. I'm not quite sure as the reader if Updike is inviting you to praise Sammy or to think like he does. You've got a lot of growing up to do and a lot of lessons to learn, young man. It may be one of those stories that when you read when you're 15 or 20, you think, go, Sammy, go. And then when you're about 40 and you read it, you think, you've got a lot to learn, Sammy. Because I'm not quite sure. Now, we never want to talk about what the author intended. We don't want to say Updike intended, because we really we talk about what they did, not what they intended to do. But since we're teaching these in a writer's workshop, what they intended to do is a little bit relevant, because I'm trying to use these short stories to show you how to write. You following me? But what did some of y'all think? Did you think that we were supposed to think he did the right thing, or that he's got a smart aleck little punk that needs to grow up? I can't, either reading, I think the story supports either reading.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost not, I don't know, like it's almost not for us to decide, or it's like we just get to kind of see it happen and enjoy his naivety and not necessarily judge it thematically, but just observe it.
Yeah, that's a very good read on it. Yeah, we're just watching it, and it's just kind of a little bit humorous, a little bit sad, a little bit entertaining. I think Updike captures one of those things about qualities about humanity. We've all pulled a stunt like this, or wish we had of, kind of thing. I'll tell you what I think Updike does a really good job is showing so subtly the sexual tension without ever really saying it. What about Queenie? The one that he nicknamed her Queenie in his mind. The one that he said was always leading the other two. Any observations about her? And then we've got Lingle, the guy that works at the supermarket. My reading of it was all three of those had a lot in common. They were all kind of these kind of smart alecky, kind of control freaks, kind of didn't want to go by the rules, felt like they were a little bit above the rules. I felt like there were some commonalities between those three characters.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also felt it was interesting the way he introduced Queenie. He left her until the end, and it was almost like she had her two, like, I don't know what you want to call them, like cronies or something like that. Like he introduces them as like almost like bringing them in before her, and she has like the grand entrance kind of thing.
Yeah, almost like they're kind of groupies or something,
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know, some of y'all may be too young, but the A&P used to be a real popular grocery store. I guess y'all picked up on that, but it was real popular like Vons or Kroger or Ralph's. What about the setting of this story?
I felt the as far as the setting and time period.
Well, just time period or the
right.
Yeah.
I
You,
feel.
Bobby. Let me interrupt you for 1 minute. I'm so sorry that I forget.
Yeah.
Don't forget what you want to say though.
Mm.
Thank you, Bobby. Setting also has to do with time period and different things like that. I focus way too much on locale, but it's also the time period that something occurs in, and the sort of the cultural, social conditions. For example, my daughter and I are writing a novel about the circus. Well, in some ways, the circus is the setting. The circus is an institution. For example, the university is an institution, the prison. So there's also many other different kinds of settings besides just locale. Please continue, Bobby. Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. But I feel like he made an effort to strip the time setting out of it. There were like little hints. Like I worked in a grocery store for a long time, so it's like the way that they were ringing things up. I was like, oh man, that's archaic. And it wasn't until I got to the very end that I saw that it was written in 62, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So, but the whole time, it's like the even like some of the things he's talking about with like the bathing suit and stuff like that, it doesn't really give away what time period it takes place in, which I feel like is something a lot of writers try to do to try to make it so that it's not so dated that it becomes irrelevant when someone reads it in the future. So I feel like he did a really good job of that. And just, again, being, someone who worked in a grocery store for a while, the way he explains it and just kind of the monotony of it and just the mundane nature of like the way he lists what's on each aisle as the name of the aisle, like it just, those little details went a long way as because it makes it so that with the setting being the grocery store and being mundane, it's like literally these three girls walking in is the most exciting thing that has happened all day. And the drama and kind of the peak of that moment comes through so much bigger because it's such a boring setting. If they were coming in on a beach and everyone was partying on a beach and these three girls walked onto the beach, it wouldn't be dramatic at all. But because it's such a boring setting, it kind of highlights it a little more.
That's an excellent read on it, an excellent read. And mixed with that a little sexual tension, Mm-hmm. So, yeah, because if it had been three guys walking in a swimsuit, we'd have a completely different story, But, yeah, that's a very good read on it. Yeah, I never thought about that, but he does do a good job of not putting this in a particular time except for the ringing up. But you got the idea that other guy really was Mr. Company, the lingo guy was really Mr. Company man, Anything else about the story? Good job, you guys. Very good. All right, let's move on to real quick bullet in the brain. This was a weird story in terms of point of view because it's hard to see how he could stay in his point of view with that ending, but he does. He manages to. What's the point? What's the theme of this story? Jacob, are you here? I think people must log in. I'm learning as I teach online. I think they log in and leave. That's okay. What one do y'all think of it? The theme.
This story was a little bit interesting to me, just with how it kind of like flashed through like his other experiences, and I don't know, it's just interesting how like it like kind of showed like things that made him lead up to like being killed, and like
Yeah.
his choices.
That's interesting. So it was almost like a death wish, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then I thought it was trying to make some kind of commentary on what our last thoughts are as we're dying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe some sort of point about what's really important in life, or the things that you think are important aren't really, or something.
Yeah, and like what's preparing to come for later.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Now, some of the ways you can sneak into their point of view and remind us whose story it is, for example, on 374, when Tobias Wolff says, Anders had never paid much attention to that part of the bank. He had no choice. If you're going to stick with writing, it depends on whether you're just wanting to take the class, and that's fine, or if you really want to be a writer. If you really want to be a writer, start making a list of different ways to remind us that we're in somebody's point of view. You know, he couldn't remember the last time he did this, or it always reminded him of, because sometimes you want to give your reader little reminders that you're still in Susie's point of view or whatever. But you don't want to keep saying he thought, she remembered, she recalled, because that gets really old. It was interesting because it was almost a story about with a moral lesson. Keep your mouth shut, you know, or something. Learn some manners, you know.
I know, even with the gun to his head, he's still being sassy.
I know. It's like, my God.
Yeah, I thought like the kind of verbal irony and the sarcasm. I thought it was cool that it was kind of believable, even in such an unbelievable setting. Like, oh my God, who would do this? Like, who would actually say these things in that moment? Something about the way that he wrote it, it felt realistic. Like, it felt like this guy could actually exist and be either this stupid or this brave. I'm not sure which one it really is.
Yeah, this stupid, this brave, or just this lack of self-control. Yeah. No, I agree with you totally. Somehow Tobias Wolff pulls it off. Somehow. Because you don't ever roll your eyes and go, this would never happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I felt like he was a smart ass like Sammy, but it cost him a lot more, right? The only problem where the point of view becomes a little bit of a problem is when it says the bullet plowed through his brain. That's stretching it a bit, because you wouldn't know. You know what I'm saying? I think it's a tribute. There's an occurrence on Owl Creek. Have any of y'all ever read that short story?
Ambrose Bierce.
Yeah, it reminds me of that short story in a way. You remember when he?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I've often wondered if this wasn't a tribute to that story.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
See it?
Yeah. Did you have any thoughts on the kind of Sistine Chapel type like artwork that he's looking at while he's in line and staring at the ceiling? I couldn't really make anything of it, but it just seems so specific with Zeus and like this whole scene playing out on the ceiling.
The only thing I was able to make out of it, and this is stretching it, is that he's talking about this like master art that's going to go on forever and ever, and it's just this high art and high. And then, but at the end of the day, when he's dying, what he ends up talking about is the baseball game. The only thing I could come up with was that juxtaposition about how he didn't think about God or the angels or your soul or high art,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Right. I like that. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
great.
you know, even though, and I think that it was important to note that even though that was a really recent conversation, so you couldn't argue, well, the reason he didn't think about that when he died was because he had forgotten about it or he never was exposed to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you would have to argue, well, he just got through talking about that, but he remembers something that happened 30 years ago and it was as insignificant as a baseball game. Now, I'm glad you asked that because actually one of the things that you can do when you're writing your stories, look at the way that they do that. You juxtapose one thing against the other to make it act as a foil. So, for example, if you make this, if you depict this real mean man, real jerk, then that's going to make the nice guy seem even nicer. And the nice guy is going to seem even nicer compared to the mean guy. The mean guy is going to seem even meaner compared to the nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to be careful about it because anytime you start working with these things consciously, even though I'm recommending that you do that, you don't want your seams to show. You don't want people to know, like, had I tried to pull that off with this idea of, oh, look, he was just exposed to this art about God, and it's in this famous cathedral in Rome with God and religion and all of this, but yet he's thinking about a baseball game. It would be obvious to me that I was trying to do that, and it doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? If it's obvious. Mm-hmm. You got to be really subtle about this kind of stuff.
Right. That makes sense.
Because you want your reader to be discussing your story the way we're talking about these. Now remind me, what were y'all's stories about? Which ones were y'all's?
Mine. Oh, you want to
so,
go?
Yeah, you can go first, Sophia. Thanks.
Okay. So mine, I was having a lot of trouble with it because I like to write stories just in general, and I've never actually tried to write a short story before. Like when I think about stories, I think about it for like the long haul of like a full novel. It's hard for me to try to like condense that into like a story that only lasts a couple pages when I'm like thinking about stories that would usually last probably like 300. So it's like I'm kind of struggling. So mine's like about, well, what I was thinking at first is that like a girl who was living in like a small town and her dad was like, I was trying to hint it at the beginning. I hadn't gotten to finish it yet, so I've been like working on it, but where her dad like abuses her kind of, and then she finally builds up the courage to fly to San Diego, like the furthest place away possible.
Yeah.
And from there, she is like kind of on her own and trying to figure out how to live. Like I think I'm gonna make her like, because I had her go to like a hotel, and then she like met someone on the beach, and maybe like kind of possibly like slightly intertwined like a love story in there, but I feel like it's too long, so I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Let me give you some advice. I don't know how to help you, but I don't know the answer, but I can help maybe about. You're thinking in too big of a span. Try to narrow that down. You know what I'm saying? The story you can tell, but you just need to crunch it. You know what I'm saying? Crunch it. Yeah.
Do you think?
I think it's doable. It's doable. I remember your story now.
Okay. Like, yeah, because I get too caught up kind of in all of the descriptions often.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't sure if I should just kind of like almost just scrap it and try out with a new idea that could be something that was less lengthy, that had a story in it.
You know, one or two things. I think that if you tried to tack on and start speeding up the pace on that story, it probably wouldn't work because it would be disbalanced.
Yeah.
But maybe you could go back and rewrite some of the beginning and scrunch it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
See if it works. If it's not, though, I would just start over.
Okay, thank you.
Because it's real hard sometimes to fix a story.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and let me tell you, I'm going to be brutally honest with y'all, because I know sometimes going through college, you just think, man, at this point, I just got to do whatever's works most manageable, which is teacher phrase for easier, right? Most manageable. I'm telling you, I have wasted so many hours and days trying to fix a story or a paper when it would have been much easier just to start all over.
Yeah.
because you try to salvage that and it's not working, and you keep trying because we don't want to let go of those pages. You know what I'm saying? I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember your story, and I think it might be fixable.
Okay.
It didn't seem like never occurred to me that it was way too slow of a pace.
Okay.
Yeah, I read it as well, and I thought it was really good. And I definitely don't think you should scrap it, but I don't remember, or maybe it wasn't obvious enough, the idea of, like, you said her father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
tried to hint it very subtly so that it kind of had the reader kind of guessing, like, who this person is, or she ran away from, like, why, just to kind of like keep them interested.
Yeah, I thought it was like an ex-boyfriend or something like that. That's
thought it was
where
too.
I thought it was coming from.
Yeah.
And what was yours, Bobby?
Mine was about a guy who's, like, waking up, going to the beach to kind of basically wash off the night before, but and it's kind of the same thing. I was really subtly trying to work in what the what the overall meaning was, and basically what I was trying to get at was the idea of, like, okay, I'm 1 year older. Now is the time where I become mature. Now is the time where I grow up, and then coming to the realization, like, basically this has been going on forever, and maybe we don't grow up, and maybe we just keep making the same mistakes, and we just watch everyone get old with us and look at other people doing the same thing, but they're younger, and they just have longer to go till they end up like us.
I like that idea. So instead
I didn't pull it off.
Instead of a resolution where we say we learn from our mistakes, we never do.
Right.
Yeah, I remember your story because I remember thinking that it was really strong because it was real subtle.
Yeah, and I was getting worried that when I've been working on it, it's like the subtlety is so subtle that I feel like that message isn't getting across.
It's not.
Yeah.
You're going to have to give us a little bit more something to work with.
Right. But real quick, Sophia, one thing, the reason I brought up that you saying her dad is, like, I feel like now the end really makes sense to me of, like, why this job is so important to her.
Mm-hmm.
It has something to do with, like, her independence and her strength, and that makes way more sense to me now of, like, I
should make it less subtle, but thank you.
Yeah, no, because I really like that, because I'm like, oh my God, yeah, of course she needs this job. Like, that's the point. Like, that is her way out. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I feel like running with that would be really, really cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your input. I liked it a lot.
Totally. Yeah.
I wish we were in a class where we could pass each other stories around and read them. Hi, Megan.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm okay, actually. I just got here, yes.
Okay, I think we're just about wrapping it up. I don't know if you got the time confused, but...
oh, okay. I think I did. Sorry about that.
No,
I can watch the Zoom video
watch
again.
the video.
Yeah.
Did you have any questions or comments, though? I don't want to just ignore you.
No. I was just curious. I guess I got the time wrong, and I didn't realize what time it was supposed to be, but I can watch the Zoom meeting again and see what we really talked about.
Yeah, watch the Zoom meeting because your peers had some really, really good comments. I accidentally forgot to start recording the first of it, but it was just me babbling anyway. So listen, you guys, make sure that are y'all keeping up with the readings and everything?
Yes.
Okay. Since I'm fairly new to online teaching, I just want to make sure, am I making everything clear to y'all? Are the instructions and everything, or do y'all feel like you know what you're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I feel like I am.
All right.
Yeah, I agree.
I think y'all should do that extra credit. 1 to 2 points doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm telling you, it can make the difference between a grade. All you have to do is write down plot, characterization, and put a few sentences down.
It seems simple enough.
Yeah, but I mean, I would do it because, I know everybody in the class is doing really well, but you never know if you're going to need those points or not,
Yeah.
It's a cool story, too. I really like it.
It's a great story, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But, you just know what's going to, you kind of see it coming, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can't thank you all enough for attending the meeting, and I just want to tell you all, I'm really, the class, I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. So if y'all have any questions, email me. I'm here. I want to help you. I really do want to. So thank you for your feedback, and thank you for your comments, and y'all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
You too. Thanks so much.
Good
Bye.
night.
Good night.